I'm just grateful that we're actually talking about this.
Yeah.
And there's some degree of interest for what I'm in terms of my story on this platform. So I'm happy to let it out there. At least it's going to exist and live somewhere. So I'm extremely grateful for it, because it's seldom that we go this deep into the history. And people, a lot of the things that I'm telling you now, like 90% of this information, people don't know. Not even POC's hardcore fans, they don't even know about a lot of these things that we're chatting about right now.
Only one radio station has a grand master of South African hip hop, South African hip hop, South African DJ Ready D.
Yeah, man, you got the power to make a change. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Tuesdays, it's all about making that change right here on the Ready D Show. It's 17 shots of hip-hop straight to the dome, and you are tuned into Group FM, connecting Cape Town City. Yeah, we are connecting you to hip-hop music.
DJ Ready D is a hip-hop icon, but very few people have ever heard all of the extraordinary stories behind the legacy of a man who has been crucial to the birth and growth of South African hip-hop. From facing apartheid guns to performing with James Brown and the Fugees, from Prophets of the City to Good Hope FM, and every remarkable moment in a revolutionary career, this is D unfolding his memories and perspectives in 3 parts. DJ Ready D, what is your first memory of hip-hop as a musical form?
My first memory of hip-hop goes back to Rapper's Delight. When I heard Rapper's Delight for the first time, I didn't quite understand what it was, but I could identify the music and relate to the music, because the actual backtrack that they used over there, they actually did a remake of a band called Shik's disco hit called Good Times. And when the Sugar Hill Gang started rapping and they were talking about certain things in there, of course, I aspired to that as well. They were talking about color TVs and they were talking about good times and really cool things. So growing up and coming from a disadvantaged background, of course, you're going to aspire to all those things. Plus the beat's cool. There's a nice vibe and rhythm going through the track. And I didn't know that this was going to be called hip hop at some stage. And we heard like hip hop, heavy to the heavy, hip. Little to know they're actually talking about the culture in that song.
So where were you? How old were you? Where were you staying?
I was, at that point, we lived in District 6. We were living at our final, I would say, year and a half in District 6. I was 11 years old at the time, about 10 going in for 11. And the way that the song was introduced to me was through friends of my sisters. They used to work on SAF Marine, so they used to travel the world with the SAF Marine, with the shipping company. They used to work on these boats. And these were kids that come from Gympie Street. They had this really cool Impala. They had a 63, I think it was. They had this portable turntable in the boot and a whole stack of vinyls. And there was, and when they come back from their trips abroad, they used to come back with all the cool music, And then the portable player would come out. Boom, the first thing was Rapper's Delight. Hip hop, heavy to the hip. And I'm like, holy Lord, what is that? And then the second record was Curtis Blow. These are the breaks. So I remember, clap your hands, everybody, if you got what it takes. And I'm like, damn, these beats are so cool and so funky, because that time hip hop was all about disco at the time. And I think disco was the commercial and the in sound in New York at the time as well. So, it would make sense, for us to be exposed to that particular style and sound of hip hop. Until much later, we were introduced to the more electronic side of hip hop. And just going back to District 6 very quickly, so with my friends, at least my sister's friends coming there, I used to be the kid that used to play the music for everybody that was sitting in the room. And as a little kid, it gave me the opportunity to eavesdrop as well, to hear what the older kids were talking about. Because everybody else were teenagers, and they were going into their 20s and so forth. And I guess that is how I started out being a DJ as well. I didn't know, that's going to be my path at some stage. I used to play all the music and checking out all these vibes and all these beats and so forth. Then we were, of course, amongst the families that were forced out of District 6. And with that, we ended up in Lentegeur, Mitchell's Plain. And living in Mitchell's Plain, I was then exposed to a music video called Buffalo Girls by a very avant-garde artist, Malcolm McLaren. He was a British artist and he used to experiment with all different sounds. On this particular project, he experimented with the sound in New York as well as a lot of South African music as well, because on this album he had this really awesome, really interesting electronic sound with DJ scratching in the music. Then he also had like music that would resemble what was going on in Sophiatown and Soweto at the time, you know, and they used to call it double Dutch, and that was a sport in the US as well. So we were exposed to those elements, and when I saw the music video, I was like, sure, I can relate to what's happening in that music video, because I saw DJs scratching and that wiki sound. That is the thing that grabbed my attention. The other thing was the b-boys that I saw, you know, busting moves, and these kids were doing footwork and they were spinning on their backs and spinning on their heads and they were on their elbows, and I'm like, but I can relate to that, because as kids we grew up with kung fu movies, you know, so Silver Fox and Jackie Chan and all these other things that we were exposed to. We used to emulate that. So I thought this was an interesting form of kung fu combined with gymnastics to a very interesting sound. I want to do that, you know. So that was the next level, or the next phase. Then the Michael Jackson craze blew up in Mitchell's Plain at that time, and we're going back to the early 80s now. We're going to 81 right now. Michael Jackson craze blew up. Everybody wanted to be Michael Jackson, and my head was still stuck on the sound that I heard. And a school friend of mine, we walked into a record store in Mitchell's Plain Town Center one day, and we found this compilation record. And on this record, there was a song by a band called Nucleus called Wiki Wiki. And it was a type of electronica sounding song, but something very unusual. It wasn't disco, it wasn't pop, it was something that we were yet to make sense of. And in the song, they had these characters rapping in high-pitched voices. And we put all the pieces together. Then we started off with our little b-boy crew. We called ourselves the City Kids. So it was myself, Razano, known as DJ Razano these days, and another guy that became the legendary, or the granddad of South African graph writing, Hocha. The three of us formed a crew called the City Kids, and Razano had the TV and he had the video machine, and he recorded all these music videos, and we used to practice all these moves that you've seen on the tapes. And then we tried out all the locking and the popping, and Michael Jackson did the moonwalk, and then we saw b-boys moonwalking in videos, and we're like, damn, that's cool, we need to be on that as well. When Billie Jean broke, all hell broke loose. Every single person in Cape Town was Michael Jackson. You could find Michael Jackson on every single street corner. He was there in some place, in every single club. And at that point, this club called Club Fantasy in Mitchell's Plain, they decided to have a Michael Jackson competition, and all the Michael Jacksons jumped up onto the platform and they busted out their moves, and here comes three guys in P-caps. We came out with white gloves. We had on these American baseball tops, and we had Converse sneakers. At that time, sneakers weren't the in thing. It wasn't popular really, only amongst a certain crowd, but we will have that discussion on another day. And of course, the trousers was very, very different, because we emulated what we saw in the music videos. And then we started doing this really strange dance in front of the huge crowd, and it wasn't a Michael Jackson dance. The only thing that people could relate to was the moonwalk that we did. Then we were locking and popping and passing on shock waves to each other, and then there was this really strange music playing in the background, and then all of a sudden we would break down onto the floor and we were back up again. We ended up winning the competition, and we became the resident dancers at Club Fantasy. And from there onwards, we ran this hip-hop, if you want to call it hip-hop classes at the club. And from there, things just started to escalate for us, you know, as a b-boy crew. And also as people being exposed and learning about the culture, things just started to evolve from that point on.
So I love what you said about recognizing so much in what also seemed to in some ways be a new and alien hip-hop culture, recognizing the dancing, kind of empathizing with the music videos. How much do you think hip-hop was already existent in one shape or form and just needed to be styled a little bit in District 6 when you grew up, and then in Mitchell's Plain?
In terms of hip-hop being a part of us and a part of our culture, it was always there. We never knew. that this thing was going to be called hip-hop, was going to be linked to this Western culture called hip-hop, because we were always speaking in some rhyme form. We were always making jokes at each other, you know, and when we speak in the dialect, it was very, very rhythmical. And when the choirs and the Coon Carnival and the Nachtroep and all these guys used to write these songs, they would always write it in some rhyme form, the moppies and all these things. So we were heavily influenced by that as well. So that was a part of our culture forever, practically. We were doing this dance and we were listening to this music. 2 years later, it started to break in the mainstream media as breakdancing and hip-hop, and that's when we learned, you know, what this thing was all about. So I think with the music, with the rhythm, with the storytelling, with rapping, with rhyming, and you know, all these different elements, the graph writing and all this, you'll hear a lot of people making reference to the fact, yes, it is a part of the African tradition and culture. If you trace its roots back to the San and the Khoi tribes, you know, there was storytelling, there was dancing, there was art, you know, whether it's on rocks or in caves or wherever, you know, it was all linked to a culture. So that is some of the similarities that hip-hop carry as well. So I think based on that, we can truly build that connection as well. And if we look at it, the culture was practically, it was pioneered and it evolved amongst the community that was practically enslaved and stolen out of Africa and put in elsewhere in the world as well. And wherever they were placed, through all the different sounds and the cultures that came out of that, you know, it eventually came back to Africa in the form of hip-hop. So we're at this point now where we're kind of giving it our interpretation, and it's a part of our expression now. So we're adding to the growth and the evolution of the sound and the culture in the modern day.
And what I found really interesting about what you were saying earlier about your first exposures, and you can remember specific songs like Rapper's Delight, and how it was, you would only get those records if somebody brought it to you from overseas. So it's so funny because these days I think youngsters can get exposed to so much different music through globalization, the internet technologies, but you can literally say it was this song and this record and this and these moments that this specific person, if they'd never bought it and they'd never shown it to me, my entire career, my entire life would have been completely different. It's a totally different world. Like when you were a youngster, starting out as a DJ, I don't know, trying to get sets playing this music that a lot of people weren't listening to, or at least experiencing it differently, how did you get the music?
Man, we used to hustle really hard. A lot of our people went exile. So we had a lot of our friends had family abroad as well, and we had friends that went abroad as well, and a lot of the music used to come back on cassettes or tapes, and we used to make copies of these tapes and distribute it. On Saturdays we used to meet up with b-boy crews and battle in the city center. We used to battle at the Golden Acre. We used to battle on the station, especially on the white side of the station. The surface was nice though. At that time there was that clear separation, and we used to battle till the cops and the security would chase us away. Then there was another space in St. George's Mall called Garlics. We used to battle there till the cops chased us away, because you know, people of color, black kids or colored kids, you weren't allowed in certain areas. Then we used to go all the way down to the Grand Parade, and we used to battle there as well. And while these battles are taking place, we are actually exchanging tapes, and this is how the music circulated. And through all of this movement taking place on the streets though, some of our friends were actually dancing at a matinee club that used to play punk rock and reggae and thrash metal and all these things. So they were into the whole goth and thrash movement, and they were kids that lived around the corner from our place in Mitchell's Plain, and I was like, you know, you're not supposed to be in this rock music and this metal stuff that white people's into. It blew our minds, and I was like, look how you're dressing. They were, you know, the dark eyeshadow, the dark clothing, and they resembled punks and whatever. And they told us, guys, you must come with us to this club and come and see what it's all about. And the first thing is like, we're not going to be dancing and going to a club where there's white people, because of course we were scared of white people, you know, because of what went down at that time, you know, and how practically how we were conditioned as well, you know, to think about white people. And we eventually found, you know, the strength and the energy to go with him after a battle on the Grand Parade one day. They dragged us in there, and we were like, holy Lord, first and foremost, this place is dark. We can't see anybody in this place. And then the music came on, and there was all these kids of color with big pins and spikes, and I'm like, oh, what the heck is going on over here now? And then at one stage, they were like, give your vinyl to the DJ. Handed the vinyl over to the DJ played the track for us. They opened up a circle, and we ended up battling in the club and performing in the club. And this club was called Club Teasers back in the day. No connection to the strip joint. No connection to that. That was in Harrington Street, right opposite the castle. And then we decided every Saturday after we've done our thing on the Grand Parade, we would go there. And from the 10-minute little session they used to give us, it became 20 minutes. Then the club owner, he found the faith to put us into the DJ box, and then we were granted a 30 minutes, and more kids used to learn about this, and this is how things started to grow. More kids of color, kids from Googs came, kids from Langa came, Mitchell's Plain, Ocean View, Atlantis, Stellenbosch, Paul. All these kids came from all over, you know, to come and jam at this club. And that was practically the birth of hip-hop, and where it kind of found a home. And from there it would spread out into all these different areas, and this was the first time we interacted with white people without any issues. No issues, nothing, like zero issues. You could be there, non-pretentious, you could have a cool conversation with people. There was nobody, you know, there was no prejudice of people being condescending towards you. It was all about the music, the vibe, the culture, and the energy. So it was hip-hoppers interacting with punk rockers, b-boys and b-girls jumping into the thrash bash sessions, and all you got to do is hope you're going to come out alive and you're not going to be poked full of holes and whatever. And then all of a sudden there's a reggae session, so it's like Bob Marley, Uhuru, and all these sounds playing, and you know, that was kind of the vibe. And all of us from the club, we would all then meet on the Grand Parade again, and as Gatsby's and as Jesters and all these things we used to eat, and everybody back on the trains, and we go to our different trains. So all the kids from Bonteheuwel and all these different areas, the trains were packed with hip-hoppers, and then we would all commute back home, and then next Saturday we would do it all over again. And that was kind of the cycle. And I just wanted to get back to the music. So with us being in the club and having these opportunities to DJ in the club, we needed more music. And we used to go to the mainstream record stores and order our music. And these guys used to bring the records in for us on special order. And all the other club DJs that were looking for the Rick Astley's and the Kylie Minogues and the Farley Jackmaster Funks. And all these DJs used to congregate all the big names in the city of that era. And we were like the two guys standing in the shadows, myself and DJ Rosano. And the minute the guys, they used to open up the doors on a Tuesday for DJs after hours. So all the DJs were lined up and they would fight to be in the queue. And we were just chilled in the background. The doors open, everybody rushed to the counters. So all the big guys, you know, the established guys, they would all rush for their piles. And then myself and Rosana would just put our hands over and grab Run DMC, and we grab Public Enemy and Salt and Pepper and NWA, and the guys were like, what? Who's these guys? What is this music? You know, we always questioned about what is this? Who is this? And when the guys used to play the music in the store, it didn't make sense to those guys, but we knew, you know, what we needed it for. And from there, that's how I would say the DJ scene, or the hip-hop DJ scene and the sound actually exploded out of the Teasers. The Teasers later became the base when it moved to 88 Short Market Street. And with that move, the culture expanded as well. And that culture was actually transferred to Joburg as well.
So were you guys pulling around crates of records on the trains?
Oh, Lord. Oh, you don't want to know about pulling around records. I had a backpack of records on my back. We had the big milk crate packed with records. Rosano had his stack. So in total, we would be pulling around about 40 to 50 kilograms in weight of records.
It's like an army training session.
I'm telling you, and we had to get homies to help us as well. And at that time it was violent times as well, because gangs used to jump onto the trains and rob people. So we had to find creative ways to store the records and to split the piles, you know, and hide it behind people's backs and under the seats and all these different types of things. So we had huge challenges with protecting the music as well. And in '86, I went to the UK. I was fortunate enough to be sponsored with a strip. And when I came back with so much vinyl and so much music. And I came back with this concept of a 24-hour clubbing session as well. So we introduced that to the kids that used to jam at at Club Teasers. And for the 24-hour sessions, my Ford Cortina 30S was loaded with crates, and that thing was scraping all the way from Mitchell's Plain to Cape Town, and I couldn't go over 30 or 40 kilometers per hour. There was just too much weight in the car because I needed all that vinyl to play, for the 24-hour set, and I had Rosano's vinyl in the car and all these things as well. So that's what we had to do, man, to make it happen. So you can actually have that times 10,000 on your laptop in terms of the music.
Way less than a
way less. And now you can just plug in your digital controllers and whatever, and you could probably play for 100 hours, never mind 24 hours, So that's the convenience between then and now. But I think the lessons and the value, the deep connection and the understanding of music is different from then and now as well, and the appreciation for artists as well. Number one, the vinyl, it's a challenge to get it. It was very, very expensive at the time. So for us to get the money and save the money, we had to find creative ways to get the money to do that. The minute the vinyl land and you pick it up, it's tangible. You pick it up, you feel it, you look at it, you're looking at the artwork, you're looking at the photography, you're looking at the outfits of the artists, you're learning so much, you flip it around. There's all the credits, we're learning about the labels, the publishers.
The lyrics, yeah.
Some of them had inner sleeves with lyrics in as well, so you would get the lyrics and you'd get special edition vinyls as well. We used to get color vinyls at one stage as well. Then you would get the limited edition vinyls as well, where there was extra photos and there was things that didn't really come through, if you want to call it sort of like the mainstream runs. So you get the limited edition packs. So you have another perspective, and your knowledge and insight is very, very different. And you could understand when a pressing came from the UK, or whether it came from Belgium, or whether it came from the US, because all these different territories had different quality pressings. Unfortunately, South African vinyl at the time didn't have a really, really, really good quality for hip-hop over here, so we had to find ways as well to get our music pressed elsewhere in the world as well, until the formula was practically mastered within our borders.
So I'd love to ask a question just before we get to POC, which must be obvious for you, or at least the answer must be obvious, but maybe quite hard to describe. Is like you're describing this incredible journey long before blowing up or being able to turn your music into a career that could sustain your whole life. What was the inspiration for that passion? Because it's not only the fact that you were starting to develop a music career, but you were launching an entire new kind of music scene in Cape Town that has now taken over the whole of South Africa.
Yeah.
What kept you going? What was the inspirational and the passion that drove you almost, because you sound a little bit crazy. You sound a little bit manic, like the links that you 24-hour events, running from gangsters with your 50 kilograms of records.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Not forgetting being stopped at the blockades by the military at the time. I'm talking about 86, 87. We used to walk from our home in Lentegeur to go and perform at Club Fantasy. Remember, we were the resident dancers, and that was sort of in the midst of the state of emergencies, and we were harassed by the military. We had guns stuck in our faces, military freaking hardware stuck in our faces, where these soldiers would force us to dance on tar. My one friend, in fact, he was a white b-boy. He was interrogated one day. Why are you here with all these potnotas? That was the whole vibe. And in order for you to prove who you are, you're going to dance. And this kid had to do a knee spin on the tar until his pants was burnt through. There was a big hole and blood gushing out of his knees. So that is how we were treated. Ramon had to do head spins on tar until his head was bleeding. So that was the type of harassment that we faced, for the culture. But just to get back to your question, hip-hop culture, the essence, the science behind all the different elements that make up hip-hop culture, it's so evolutionary, revolutionary, and hip-hop culture by nature is very, very competitive. So in order for you to be on top of your game, you're going to have to spend a lot of time being the practitioner. When I started off, I used to be involved with everything. I was a graph writer, I was a b-boy, I was the DJ, I was the MC, and then I thought I could become a producer And you reach a point where you have to make up your mind, where do you want to excel? And then you find yourself caught up. Then graph writing fell away, being an MC started falling away, and then it was b-boying and DJing. And then at one stage, the b-boying fell away because now I had to focus on DJing. And then the DJ battles came up and these competitions started to come up, and you needed to spend a lot of time, and we still didn't learn much if we look at where we are right now, because it's always encouraging you to really excel and to work and to work and to work. So your head's always spinning. You're always trying to find out how to reach the next level. If you're a b-boy, the 6-step, the power move, these guys are now defying the laws of gravity like never ever before. They're doing these gymnastic orientated moves, air twists, elbow spins. If we did it a quarter in the 80s and the 90s, you achieve something massive. So now you get b-boys that can practically spin on their elbows for days. No problem, they can do these bullet head spins for days. If we could do like 10 head spins, bullet head spins, damn, I'm the god of head spins. Now you're finding these kids, they can just spin forever and forever and forever, and the power moves have become. So as things develop on that front, it's the same in the graph world. The colors, the markers, the concepts, the wild style pieces, the throw ups, how you're gonna survive that. DJing, extremely complex. Now we have the digital age, we have controllers, we have CDJs, we have all these different things. And to develop your craft on those units, there's new frontiers opening, because you're now being given a whole set of new tools. So not only are you the DJ, you're the remixer, you're the mashup dude, you're recomposing, you're restructuring, you're rearranging music as well. So you're the composer and you're the producer and you're the DJ as well. And for MCing, I don't even want to go there, because that is like another world on its own as well as storytelling skills and where we are. But remember, I'm not talking about rap. I'm not talking about the formulated, watered down version of what people perceive hip hop to be. I'm talking about the culture. And then there's the role of the activist as well. You know, he or she, they are the ones that keep the thinking going, the intellect. You know, they take care of all of those aspects. That's where economics, that is where politics, that's where social aspects, all of those things operate within that sphere at the moment. So you're in this realm where through your craft, you're battling to perfect your craft, and you still have to perform in a realm where there's some degree of consciousness. And for us, it was culture shock on all levels. It's like, I'm only a b-boy, I only want to do my flare into my head spin, and I want to come back into a turtle and a freeze. For me, that was good enough. And now you're being exposed to Public Enemy, Paris, NWA, all these other guys, and now the philosophy starts creeping in. Now it's KRS-One, it's X-Clan and all these guys. That was another evolutionary aspect of hip-hop music as well. So to cope with all of that, that was really, really hectic stuff. Even up until today, you know, it's still hectic to cope on that level. But for some reason, for me personally, I always feel that there's so much to learn, and I haven't accomplished anything yet. I still feel like, you know, I'm yet to discover what this culture is all about. You know, I'm still yet to discover what the heck it is that I'm doing. I just know I love music, and I'm curious about putting things together to see what the outcome is going to be. But I'm still at that point where I'm still trying to make sense of it. But I guess this is what hip hop does to you, if you're that connected to the culture.
I mean, it sounds like such a hunger and like a never-ending obsession.
100%, yeah.
And I mean, it's really, really extraordinary, because in many ways, you and the community that you were in created a connection between a South African form of hip hop and the international global hip hop movement.
Yeah.
So it wasn't like you just got your obsession and then moved into a pre-existing movement. It was largely formed through your guys' toil, which is quite incredible.
Yeah, we didn't intend for that to happen. You know, we just did what felt natural at the time as well. And the way we were exposed to hip hop, and you know, everything that I spoke about with the philosophies and all these things, hardcore hip hop actually refers to creativity. And our understanding of hip hop was and still is, you gotta try and formulate some form of originality, or at least need to make a very, very unique impact. you know. And for us, that is always what we as prophets of the city, though, you know, that's where we always try to be. That was our lane, and that would sometimes send us down the rabbit hole on many occasions, and we weren't sure if we were going to even come out on the other side, but we needed to go down that path.
Well, let's talk about that right now. Because I was just thinking, like, you did all of this kind of years of, I don't know if the word is apprenticeship. It kind of sounds like with the historical viewpoint, like you were just preparing all those years for what Prophets of the City ultimately became, and that, as you said, with hardcore hip hop, that very unique creative impact, which has never been seen before. So tell me about how Prophets of the City started.
Prophets of the City, we're going to go back to teasers right now. You know, in the club we used to have all these different sessions, and eventually when they started giving us 1 hour and 2 hours to play hip hop music, we introduced the ciphers into the club as well. And we used to have like these special sessions, and then MCs used to come up, exhibit their skills, and we would also have MC battles take place in the club as well. There was this one kid that was a really freaking mind-blowing battle rhymer, and I could identify where his rhyme style was coming from. And you know, we were always busy either breaking, and once you're done breaking and you're done with your b-boy moves, you're back behind the decks playing the beats. So I never had the opportunity to truly connect with him. But he used to be there every single Saturday, him and his partner, freaking just taking out everybody. Everybody just would get taken out by this kid. His name was DSA, the Devastator, sound all around. That was his name on the microphone. Then a mutual friend of mine told me this guy's dad actually got a recording studio. And me coming from Mitchell's Plain and Rapper's Delight entered my mind at that time, color TV, so I can see, and swimming pools and all these things. And I'm like, bro, we're living in this little house in Mitchell's Plain. I need to find out if I can make a move and get myself a color TV and a swimming pool. And this is probably going to be my meal ticket right here. So I had different motives. We were introduced. This friend of ours introduced us. D, this is Shaheen, this is D.
Not DSA.
Actually it was DSA, yeah, DSA, and I learned that it was Shaheen afterwards. Shaheen needed to be convinced that this dude can truly scratch, and you're not doing, and things are not on the vinyl at the top there, you know, because the DJ box was elevated and people couldn't see the box really. So we were up there, and while we were scratching, you know, you couldn't really see what was happening. Then I invited him to my house one day after the club. I was busting all this scratching and all these things, and he was like, yo, cool, let's hook up. And then my thing was, dude, I need to speak to your father. How can I talk to your dad? Because I heard about the recording studio and all these things. And and I told him, look, can I give you a tape? And I gave him a cassette deck, at least a cassette that I recorded on a cassette deck. And one of my friends, a lady, she busted some lyrics over that. So I didn't have a multi-track recorder, nothing fancy as this. I would record from one tape to the next tape, and the same tape, rotate the cassettes to create like a multi-track sort of formatted track. And I made a rap on Heavy D's Mr. Big Stuff beat, and I gave him the tape. He took the tape home. About 2-3 weeks later, got a call, his dad wants to see me. And that was the start right there. His dad's partner, he was one of these avant-garde dudes as well, who could fully relate to hip-hop culture. He traveled the world. He was based in the UK at one stage, so he was exposed to the culture. So that interested them to know that there's people that's actually busy with this music in this town. We ended up in the recording studio, just messing around with demos. And my vibe was, guy, when are we going to record our version of Rapper's Delight? You know, I'm hungry over here, and my swimming pool is waiting for me.
Color TV.
I'm stuck on this color TV, man. We still got the old school black and white telephone there that we have to knock every time, you know, the pictures start doing funny things, and we're still using the hangers. You know, I want the real deal. And then this guy wouldn't want to hear my story. And he was all about black consciousness, and I'm like, but I don't understand what you're saying. Steve Biko and Nelson Mandela, and you know, it's a state of emergencies, and we gotta say something and do something. And I'm like, dude, I don't care. You say what you want to say, but I want to be the ghetto superstar over here. And then one day, we were sitting in the recording studio, and he was going through his dad's record collection. Pulled out a vinyl by Abdullah Ibrahim. known as Dollar Brand at the time. Put the record on the platter, dropped the needle, the song played. I was sitting there with my notepad, he was sitting with his notepad. We were looking for samples, of course. The song played, doom, 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 doom. Abdullah Ibrahim's Little Boy. Up until today, I can't explain, I can't articulate, I can't make sense of what happened to me. It was like I went into full autonomous mode. I wrote. Shaheen wrote while the song was playing, and I actually wrote a political verse. And we recorded that, and that became a demo known as the Boksburg Blues. And that song got out into the community. We did a show, myself and Shaheen. And then we came back into the studio and I was like, dude, we need to find a name for what we're doing here. And I was like, how about Prophets of the City? And I'm like, okay, Prophets of the City, what does it actually mean? And we're like, no, but this is a name that pays tribute to all the great teachers that came before us. So it was a name that would honor teachers, honor spiritual leaders as well, like Jesus, like Moses, like the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, and everybody else out there that were regarded prophets. So that's essentially what the name means. Then ironically, we found ourselves performing on Green Market Square at the End Conscription campaign. And this whole thing was to try and protest to avoid young white boys from going to the military. And for me, this is like a weird vibe. I'm like, bro, why are we always finding ourselves in all these weird situations and peculiar situations? And things started to become a little bit more serious. We were spending more time in the recording studio. And I suggested the idea to Shaheen. And I told him, Shaheen, how about bringing in Ramon and Jasmo, the two b-boys from my b-boy crew that I belong to, Ballastic Rockers. And he was like, yeah, cool, so we're going to form a hip-hop crew. And we're like, cool, it's going to be a hip-hop crew, not a rap crew. Jasmo came in, he started with the beatboxing. Ramon came in, he had this really unique style of popping and locking and breaking, and he did really phenomenal ground movements. And that was the birth of Prophets of the City over there. Then we started working towards our first album. That album became titled Our World, and on that album you can actually hear the experimentation of the local sound, meaning the Cape Town sound and the African sound as well. And that whole album was trial and error. We couldn't produce. Shaheen's dad became the main producer for 3 albums, and he started producing a little bit less once we started getting the hang of production at the moment, from that point on. And on Our World, you'll actually hear the first experimentation with Guma music on a song called Stop the Violence. You'll hear Maklanga music over there in a song called Our World. Shane's dad actually played all the guitars. And then you actually hear Epic Fail, that became the first Afrikaans hip-hop song and the first non-English hip-hop song in this country, a song called Dollar Flat. What happened to the beat on that particular song, his dad's music sequencer crashed. The beat for Stop the Violence was playing, and we were writing to Stop the Violence, and the sequencer crashed. And instead of it going, it just went slow. And we were like, whoa, what the heck is this move? And I was like, Kiki, my bro, ala dinge moet jy los. And Shane was, and we were like, wait, let's write while this beat is playing. And that's how Dollar Flat came to be.
That's incredible.
And I tell you, man, there's such a lot of things that happened on that album that when I think about it now, it blows my mind. Hard Time on Stage, the way we produced that album was on a machine like this Roland S50 over here, only had 8 seconds of sample time. And I didn't have a fancy Technics SL1200 turntable. I had a Lenko turntable in a wooden box because I couldn't afford decks. And the way we wrote that song, Shaheen sampled a short little loop, and he would play the loop manually while rhyming. Hard Time on Stage, and Sankan, and I was mixing on the one end, trying to find break beats to mix into it, and then we'd come back and we had to multi-track, and doing all these things live. So he was practically rhyming and writing while triggering the sample over here. And when everything was done, Of course, it was triggered manually, so things weren't like 100% in a 4/4 timing pattern. And I had a turntable with no pitch control, and I had a whole stack of breakbeat records, and it wasn't a really consistent deck in terms of keeping its timing, because those decks weren't designed for what we were doing. So we had to make do with what we had, and I had to find all the spots and ways to actually manually push the track in tempo and in sync with that loop that Shane created. And I would push it and stop it and pitch bend it a little bit, and that's practically how we built that track, Hard Time. That was Murder on Stage, sorry, and that then became Hard Time on Stage. The follow-up to that was Hard Time on Stage. And of course, because we were influenced by Abdullah Ibrahim, we recorded a song called Roots, which sounds very much like Abdullah Ibrahim song. So that was, just POC's first album.
Yeah, what was the response to Owl?
The response was phenomenal. It blew our minds. On the one end, many people were proud of what we were doing. On the flip side, we were actually met with quite a lot of resistance, even from family members, because when we were rapping in Afrikaans and speaking our language and our dialect and our slang, people actually felt a degree of offense, and it was like, why are you guys talking in this gangster language? We were brought up in a decent home, and we were like, man, this is weird. We thought that you would actually support this. And the song, it's a positive song. It speaks about poverty, it speaks about gang violence, it speaks about hardship, it digs into our culture. But the album was a very, very successful album. And I mean, with the support and with the resistance, that existed at the time, we just had to soldier on, irrespective,
And throughout all of your albums in that time, there was seemingly a really, really powerful pro-black consciousness, anti-apartheid bent to that. Were you very aware that you were taking on such a stridently political position?
Yeah. When we started going from our first album into the second album, that is when things became more evident in terms of what we were busy with. When we recorded the second album, Boom Style, outside producers were brought in to soften the sound a little bit, because we were a little bit too intense, and we were signed to a major record label, and they pushed us as an anti-drugs group. So we had this whole persona. We were like angels, and this whole vibe. Little to know, we wanted to put out like hardcore, creative hip-hop music out there. When Boom Style dropped, the intensity in our community started to escalate, because now we were getting closer to Madiba being released as well. When that album dropped, we managed to squeeze in one track called On-Stem. Or was it D-Stem? No, On-Stem.
It was On-Stem because D-Stem was the actual
the anthem.
Anthem, yeah.
So we were like, bro, we're gonna make our own version of the anthem. And when we dropped the anthem, the masters were sent off to Joburg already. The album was going to get mastered, and we threw our toys out of the cot like you can't believe, meaning myself and Shaheen, because this was controversy on the highest level. Then, ironically, the SABC funded our one video called Kicking Non-Stop, but it was a very, very commercial video. And in this particular video, we went up to the SABC studios, Toyota Top 20, they practically motivated for this to happen. So we went up to Joburg, recorded the video over there, and they put these dancers, these hip-hop dancers in the video that would wear the type tutu type goodies and all these things. And we were like, oh man, and our manager was like, guys, chill out. I know what you're thinking. Just chill the hell out. And we were like, bruh, the only way we're going to chill out is if we're going to have to make a political statement. This is too commercial for us. We're not down. I'll tell you, we had fights here like you can't believe. Then we saw a picture of P.W. Botha hanging on the wall, and we saw a refrigerator, and we were like, bruh, this is the perfect way to make a political statement. Why don't we take his picture and we put it in the fridge, and we close the fridge door and we say, chill out, homeboy, to the camera. And that was the end of our music video. Then the video was banned by the SABC. And then we had to cut that scene out of the video, and then the thing got airplay, and then On-Stem arrived. Oh Lord, and that also became banned by the SABC, and that was the start of what's to come. Leading up to the third album, that was late 93, going into 94. UWC received private funding and we had to go on a national tour, on the Voting for Democracy tour. That's where we went into all the different neighborhoods and areas throughout our country and across our borders to teach our communities how they should vote and why they should vote. So we recorded music for that, and we also had a choreographed show, and we had mock voting booths and all these things. So we used to visit primary schools. We went into areas where people didn't have electricity. We've been to Alexander, we've been to Soweto, we've been to Bophuthatswana, all these places with a tour. And we actually recorded in Bob Studios. So there was a lot of controversy at Bob Studios. International artists used to come in under the radar and record there because that was one of the most sophisticated studios in the world at the time. So for a lot of them to come there, they could come in under the radar at practically record the albums next to nothing and go back home without, having to suffer the repercussions of coming to an oppressive country to record the music in a puppet state. At the time, Bophuthatswana was regarded as a puppet state. For us as prophets of the city, we knew one of the engineers that used to work there at the time, and that was our doorway in. And we thought, hell man, we have to take advantage of this opportunity because we're never ever going to see the opportunity to touch equipment like this. SSL desk with the best monitors and whatever you could throw at the band at that time. We went there, we recorded The Age of Truth. That was the third album. Then we were sitting in front of the television taking a break, and then Chris Hani was assassinated.
So this would have been what, 93?
This is 93.
Yeah.
Chris Hani was assassinated. Then we recorded a song called Blood, Bullets and Pigs. Immediately things started to change in terms of what we've seen, and and through that album we made so much political statements, and we were calling out so much people, even people of color as well, people that we felt sold our communities out. Black people, colored people, white people, whoever you were, we called you out on that particular album, and we just pushed the music and creative envelope on that particular album. We were busy making duplicates of the master, and we didn't know that the 24-track reel-to-reel recorder had a speaker outside of the studio. Then the engineer came walking past and he heard this song about blood, bullets and pigs, and Shaheen said something, Mangopi, even if we record here, because Mangopi was regarded as the president of the puppet state at the time. And we're like, we're coming to this place, but we're not going to be quiet about what it is, and we're not going to go back home and try and go in under the radar, and hide the fact that we recorded in Bophuthatswana in this recording studio. And then we of course expressed ourselves. He came rushing into the studio. This guy was in a fit, and this guy started grabbing the masters and the dats, and he freaking flipped, and he was, are you guys effing crazy? Do you want to die today? Do you want to get assassinated? You guys are blah blah. I opened up the door so you look what you were doing, and this guy just freaking went off. They confiscated the masters. Lucky our manager had a copy of the master in his back pocket, and we were just making duplicates, and that's actually how we got that album out.
Wow. So lucky.
And as we left Bophuthatswana, the AWB came in, and that's when that big standoff happened that was in the news. And we were this close from being caught up in all of that commotion. But that was our life. At that period leading up to 94, there was a lot of assassinations at the time as well. There used to be the CCB hit squads as well that were taking out people that were politically opinionated at the time, political activist leaders, whatever the case may be.
And you guys were touring, you had...
we were touring.
Anti-drug movements in schools, you were performing in different clubs, you also had the voting, education.
Definitely.
But you were also definitely political targets, or at least easy for political targeting, because you were constantly making black consciousness anti-apartheid statements.
Yeah, and we just felt the need to arm us to the teeth. And then when we got back to Cape Town, everybody was in a gun shop. One was buying the bigger cannon than the other one had, and we're like, bro, we're not going to take any chances. But that was the intensity at the time, because the albums are banned, the videos are banned. We're not getting shows in the country anymore, because at that time, everything was syndicated. So if you aggravated, or you cause the situation and you cause some sort of disruption somewhere, it would filter down so quickly where you won't get work anywhere else again, especially on those the big concerts and the big events that we used to do at the time as well. 94 arrived.
Sorry, can I just ask you about Age of Truth?
Yeah.
What was the response to that? Because you describe Prophets of the City's intensity as feeding off the intensity of the state of being in South Africa at the time. We were really on the edge of a civil war. People were being murdered in the hostels. People were being politically assassinated. You guys were armed. And then this album comes out that nearly didn't exist.
Yeah.
What was that album to South Africa and to you guys?
In all honesty, that album started to make the necessary impact years after its release. Because of the controversy and because of the word getting out there, all our channels were getting blocked. Everything was starting to get shut down to try and prevent this music from getting out. So the music circulated amongst the die-hard, hardcore Prophets of the City fans. The mainstream record stores, I don't want to mention names, they still exist today. They refused to stock the album. People used to go banging down the doors asking for the album, but they refused to stock the album because of its political nature as well. And I think people were just pumped with fear when they heard the content on the album. It was explicit, raw, in your face, black conscious, hardcore political music that pressed nerves left, right and center. Didn't matter what your color, what your beliefs, or whatever the case may be. And that includes even us. We were even shocked at what we were saying at one stage. And when I listen to some of the songs now, I'm going like, holy crap, do you even know what you guys were doing? You guys could have been taken out so easily, and you never know. Those guns were probably pointing at you, at that stage. So probably the first thing to do is to ban you guys, And that was Age of Truth. Age of Truth started to gain momentum in the academic field. There was a gentleman called Professor Adam Haupt. He was very interested in what was going on that particular album, and he actually did a thesis. And that sort of ended up, being part of academia, if you want to call it that. So that's how Age of Truth started to gain momentum 5 years, 10 years down the line. When we toured Age of Truth in the UK, Europe, Scandinavia, all these places, that was very, very, very well received over there. That led to an album called Universal Soldiers. That was kind of inspired by Age of Truth.
Okay, it's 5 minutes to 9, and I feel like we're only halfway there.
Wow, this is hardcore. Yo, this is okay. Cool.
So honestly, I've been thinking about this for the last 15 minutes. I think we should just say that that's it, and we're gonna have to sit down again for part 2, because realistically, I feel like there's so much left to talk about.
Cool.
I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm just grateful that we're actually talking about this, and there's some degree of interest for what I'm in terms of my story on this platform. So I'm happy to let it out there. At least it's going to exist and live somewhere. So I'm extremely grateful for it, because it's seldom that we go this deep into the history, and a lot of the things that I'm telling you now, like 90% of this information, people don't know. Not even POC's hardcore fans, they don't even know about a lot of these things that we're chatting about right now.
And it's funny because I feel so honored. So this is just one of the most extraordinary things that I've ever been a part of, and I keep holding back from asking you more things, looking at the clock. But there's so many things that I want to ask you about, so can we please continue?
Absolutely, definitely. No, I'm really grateful, and this is just my side of the story. The other guys had although we were all in the same camp, but we all had our unique experiences as well. We all had our own unique trials and tribulations, because although we were doing our thing, we were high profile, we were traveling and flying the world, it was a very, very lonely place to be in. When I came home, I was completely disconnected from what was going on at home. I couldn't socialize with people. I couldn't socialize with family. I couldn't even socialize with my wife. because you're caught up in the struggle, you're caught up in the music, you're caught up in the tours, and you're building up this frame of thought. And when you come back, you expect everybody to be on that same sort of way of thinking.
And to have gone through the trauma that you went through
Yeah,
and the experience that you
little
went
to
through.
know, man, you can't expect that, because we're living different lives and we're having different experiences. And strange enough, the thing that kind of orientated me and brought me back into the social circles was drifting. When I started getting involved with drifting, I met different people that were talking about different things and more sort of community sort of things. We weren't talking rap, we weren't talking about the latest scratch, we weren't talking about conspiracy movements, we weren't talking about being banned and whatever. We're talking about samosas, dalchis, the things that we grew up with, those things that we were disconnected from for almost 15 years, so that was kind of like my orientation process back into becoming social. Otherwise it was a very, very, very lonely place. I used to fear having to sit in the company of friends and family, because I'm like, sure, everything that's going, they're talking on, I can't relate, it don't interest me, just leave me at home. I still suffer from that up until this day, but it's not as extreme as it used to be after we came back from those tours. But I'm good. But cool, man. No, I really, really appreciate it.
That was incredible. Sincerely, so.
Cool. Well, welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, just unbelievable. I sincerely mean I'm so delighted.
Yeah, thank you, man.